Hello everybody, John Craig here with Performance Plus Tennis. A little bit of a different video for you today, and it comes from a lot of questions I get about, who's your favorite server, John? Who do you think are the best servers of all time? And many of you know that the serve is my favorite shot to teach in tennis. I'm known as the serve builder in the online tennis world. I've looked at every serve of every player from way back in the early days. So I'm going to go through my 5 favorite servers. I'm going to do it chronologically, and then I'm going to reveal in the end who my favorite all-time server is. And I'm not going to include servers that are taller than 6'3". And the reason is because they have a distinct advantage. John Isner, Ivo Karlovic, those guys have amazing serves, but I want to emphasize the servers that are not as tall, that had very, very effective serves, and also that maybe had technical things that are interesting that contributed to the development of the serve as it evolved through the years. So my first favorite that I'm going to talk about is Pancho Gonzalez. And Pancho Gonzalez was probably the most feared server of all time during his era. And he had a phenomenal serve. And there are great photos of Pancho serving that reveal the long axis pronation through the shoulder that no one really talked about or really knew about back in those times. But whether he did it with intention or it just happened to happen, he had beautiful technique on his motion. So he was in an era where you couldn't jump, so his feet were on the ground when he made contact. But he had an amazingly powerful serve, and I think his is worth noting as being one of the most effective serves in history, certainly one of the most feared, and he was a major contributor to understanding the technical element of the serve that really generated tremendous power. Moving forward, my next favorite that I want to talk about is Boris Becker. Now, Boris Becker, the reason why I like Boris Becker is because he was really the first player that I remember who served with a technique in his legs like we have now in modern tennis, that we see all the players doing. He loaded his legs, he had tremendous leg drive, he had a beautiful trophy position, really lifted himself up, had tremendous lift power through the legs, so he really kind of set the standard for what the modern serve became. And his serve was very powerful and very effective. One quick note about Boris, though, that was really unique is I think he's the only big server, great server in history who actually served with an Eastern forehand grip, which is really unique because he was able to still execute a full range of long axis rotation through his motion and through contact, even though he had an Eastern grip, which was quite unique. But he was had enormous serve, big server, very feared during his time. So he's really my number 2 pick for my 5 best servers of all time. Next up is John McEnroe, and I had to include a lefty server in my list. And John McEnroe had a tremendous serve, a corkscrew lefty. He had a very unique style where he really had tremendous rotation. It really started with his stance, where both feet were literally lined up on the baseline. And when he coiled into his trophy position, he was literally exposing his back to you. He had a tremendous coil in his serve. And when he uncoiled, you couldn't really tell where he was going with the serve. So even though he played in an era where wooden rackets were the predominant racket, certainly in his early part of his career, he had a tremendously effective serve. He could pull off aces left, right, center. He had tremendous accuracy. It was very difficult to read his serve. I think he really brought the rotation and coil to the game. He also used his legs quite well and drove up with his legs. So I'm going to say that John McEnroe is my favorite left-handed server of all time. Now some of you are thinking, well, what about Goran Ivanisevic or Roscoe Tanner? Yeah, those guys had really good serves as well, obviously very good serves. But John McEnroe stands out as a unique server, had a unique style, didn't have the biggest serve, but it was very, very accurate, very effective, and very difficult to read. So John McEnroe is my next pick as one of my all-time favorite servers. Next up, Pete Sampras. How could we not have Pete Sampras on any list of the great servers of all time? And what I loved about Pete was almost everything we talked about with the other servers so far. He had a tremendous motion, great motion, very much like a Pancho Gonzalez, where he had the best long axis pronation, tremendous motion in his serve. He had a great coil, very much like John McEnroe, where his back was exposed to the opponent so he could really rotate and coil around. It was very difficult to read where his serve was going. And he also had great leg drive. He had a great position, great leg drive like Boris Becker. So he had every element of the serve was there. And the thing that's fascinating about Pete Sampras is he could put the ball on a dime easily on his first or second serve. And when he was under pressure and had to get a serve in, even a second serve, he came up with second serves that were really like first serves. He had tremendous confidence in his serve under the greatest amounts of pressure and won so many key points in his career. So I think Pete Sampras, tremendous server. He's definitely in my top 5 list of all time, should be in everyone's, and Pete Sampras is in the list for sure. And finally, my favorite server, one of my favorite servers, the top 5, is Roger Federer. Again, Roger Federer wasn't extremely tall at 6'1", but he had beautiful technique. He could generate easy power. It looked like it was so effortless that it never looked like he was forcing his serve at all, and yet he could pop that serve over 130 if he wanted to anytime. He could hit the spots. He had great leg drive, great coil, great technique, and he had a different type of a tossing motion where his tossing arm moved parallel to the baseline and the ball arced back. And what made that so effective is that as the ball arced back, he could take it either early and slice it, a little bit later and flatten it, or even a little bit later and topspin it. But you really couldn't pick that up. You couldn't see what spin he was going to hit or what target he was aiming for until he made contact with the ball. So he perfected this unique movement in his serve that made him one of the greatest servers of all time. And I think he's second on the all-time list for aces, even though he was only 6'1". And he could hit spots on the court that almost no one else could hit. And he could do that without you seeing where the ball's going until it went there. So Roger Federer makes my top 5. And finally, let me reveal my number 1 server of all time of the top 5 that I've mentioned. That's Pete Sampras. Because Pete Sampras really did tie together all the elements and components of the great servers and built it into one tremendous package. And I think that even though Roger Federer had more aces because he had a longer career, I think that Roger tried to emulate a lot of things that Pete did on his serve as well. So Pete set the model for the modern serve, and really the emphasis of the long axis pronation through the serve was very unique. A lot of players are trying to mimic that today, and everyone would like to have Pete Sampras' serve. So certainly he is my top server of all time on players that are below 6'3". Thanks so much for watching today's video, and I'd love to hear your feedback and who you think your favorite player is of all time. Thanks for watching once again. Subscribe to the channel if you've not done so already. Leave your comments down below. Give us a like. Share this video with a friend. Stay tuned. We've got a lot more coming here at Performance Plus Tennis. We'll see you in the next lesson.